Fight Grind Radio on the Las Vegas Tribune radio station. This is your boy Bootsy. I got a couple fighters in here today, but first I want to give a shout out to Defiance Clothing for being nice guys and sharing the podcast sometimes. I also want to give a shout out to Tuff-N-Uff, of course, who are doing all they can to put on good shows for the amateur guys. Of course, I do work for them, so I have to say that anyway, right? That's my job. So the first guy we're going to talk to is Darnell Bumpus. Darnell was supposed to be on our last show. Unfortunately, his opponent decided he couldn't fight. And try as I might, I couldn't find an opponent on 1 day's notice for Darnell. Now, Darnell, you are actually going to be fighting at a different weight than what you were slated for last time, correct?
Yes, sir. Actually, I went up in weight to have that fight. I went up about 10 pounds to have that fight. So now I'll be fighting at the correct weight that I was supposed to fight at, which is 155.
Okay. And where do you train out of?
Actually, I train out of Gold's Gym. I have trained out of Vandalay Silva's gym.
Okay.
But mainly I've been training independently.
Right. And so you chose this year to fight at the end of this year. Is there any particular reason you chose now?
No particular reason. It just popped in my head that, you got to go after your dream.
Right.
So that's
and
what
so
I'm
it was
doing.
was it more of a snap decision, or did you build up towards it?
I've been always in the gym training, working towards it, but I just never knew of myself being an actual fighter, and
Right.
This is what I'm going to do.
Right. So you're fighting at 155. It's a pretty good division. I'd say there's a lot of guys that walk around, near enough to 155 that you can have some good fights. Do you have any overall plan for what you want to do with MMA, or are you just trying to feel it out right now?
Whatever happens.
Yeah. And so you don't have any goals, or at least direct goals to maybe go pro or whatnot, or is it just a day-to-day kind of thing, or fight to fight?
I know for a fact it's not a day-to-day thing. I'm one of the individuals that love to fight, but also know what I got to do to, get the bills paid. So
Right.
It's like, if it goes somewhere, it goes somewhere. I'm going to pursue it.
Now, you're trying to tell me that amateur MMA doesn't pay the bills? I find that hard to believe. Dozens of dollars in that game.
Well, maybe for some people, but like I said, me being a fighter, it's a dream, but also me, working in the type of field that I'm in is also a dream also.
And what type of field are you in?
Currently, I'm in law enforcement and mental health.
Okay, so clearly not a tough guy.
To some people, no.
And how is it for you, your training regimen versus your work schedule? How tough is that to deal with?
It's very tough. It's
Yeah.
very tough. It's like working 3 jobs.
Right.
But I get it done.
That's the American dream, right? 3 jobs, no time to yourself, constantly trying to get the bills paid.
Right. Gotta love it.
Right. And how long did you train at Vandalays?
I've only trained there for 2 months.
Okay. And you're currently training there, or you used to train there?
I used to train there.
Okay. So did you have any sporting background before you decided to do this?
Yeah, I ran track, and I also wrestled in high school.
And how long did you do wrestling?
I did wrestling for about 3 years.
Okay. So you're not completely new to the idea of weight cutting or dealing with different weight classes if you want to move around in weight?
Right.
And do you have any plans? I know 155 is your thing right now. It doesn't seem... How much weight do you cut or tend to cut for a fight? I know last time you went up, but...
Yeah, I'm not going to go no below 55. I'm going to stay at
Really?
that.
You don't want to do the Ken Florian and just try to do every weight class once?
No.
So, and unfortunately you didn't get to fight last time for Tuff-N-Uff. You were at the show. How'd you like the setup of the Tuff-N-Uff shows?
Loved it. Every seat in the house is a great seat. You can see the middle of the ring from anywhere.
Right. It's a little bit of a small cage there. Andre, who is also here with us, this was your first fight on this last show, which Darnell was at, and as you point out, was supposed to fight, but didn't fight.
My bad.
But this was your first fight. How did it feel finally getting out there and doing it after all this time of training for it?
It was awesome. Like it was kind of nerve wracking. Had the first fight jitters going.
Right.
It's funny because going back and looking at the tape, it's like, oh, there's so much stuff that I wanted to do, or I thought I'd always be doing when I was in the cage that I just didn't get the opportunity to.
Right.
Because your mind's racing. Well, you're not even really thinking; you're just kind of acting on instinct.
Right. And how'd that transpire as far as what you thought it would be like versus what it really was. Maybe just more we know that physically you always think you have this game plan and there's stuff you're going to do, but then you got to be more reactive. But as far as the mental preparation, were you more anxious than you thought you'd be? Was it about what you thought it would be?
I thought I would be more anxious just from doing like grappling tournament stuff. Like I would always get really anxious during those, really nervous. Like I would feel the nerves really bad.
Right.
Until like I actually stepped on the mat. This time was different. Like the nerves were still there, but once I got in the back and like started warming up and getting wrapped up, like at that point, like the nerves were gone. I was just like, I'm ready to do this. I felt good about it. But yeah, so it was kind of surprising that I was a little more calm than I thought I would be.
Right. I hear that from a lot of fighters that they feel like they're going to be much more anxious, or maybe nervous is the right word, than what ends up happening. Do you think that just has to do from preparing enough in training, or is it just because once the lights are on, you don't really have a choice but to just accept what's happening?
I think a combination of both. Because when you're training, like you know that you're preparing yourself for it, but you still like when you think about it, you're like, oh, I'm going to be under the lights, like me and this other guy locked in the cage. Like sometimes like, why am I even doing this? This is crazy. Like am I nuts? But then once you get there, it's like, all right, this is what I'm here to do. I'm ready to do it. I know what I need to do, and then it's just
right. Now, when I did my amateur fights, I had maybe 40 people that were watching, including the other fighters that were there. I'm not sure the exact number of people we had, but there were hundreds. And was that at all daunting for you, just when you first start getting out there? I know once you're in the cage, you're focused on that. But the walkout, was that a little daunting having that many people for your first fight?
I don't remember much of the walkout, to be honest. So I remember I saw like a group of my friends that were right by like the area where I was walking out. So that was cool. Like it was cool to have a lot of support there. But yeah, really the crowd, I didn't even notice them. So I don't know.
You come from the Cobra Kai camp, so you have a lot of support when you go out there. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they kind of booed Mikowski when he first came out, which
I was thrown off a little bit by that. But
well, they're trying to support. I get where they're coming. They're coming from a good place, and they're trying to play the game and be the third man in the ring, or I guess fourth man in the ring essentially. But at the same time, if they knew Mikowski, they would probably like the guy.
Yeah.
And what was it like having to deal with someone like him who's so he's a very unorthodox fighter? Because he comes from street fighting background, he doesn't have any official training, but he seems to be pretty tough, and he seems to have a gas tank. He doesn't really stop going.
Yeah, he was a tough guy. He definitely had more of a gas tank than I thought he would. But fighting him was weird because in the gym, training with all these guys who trained for a while, they're pretty refined, and then fighting him this wild style. I was like, geez, like what's he gonna throw next? So it was really just all about staying calm, making sure I was doing what I've trained to do.
Right.
And being reactive to his kind of
right. How does that wild overhand right tomahawk chop he throws? I saw that pegged you a couple of times. It's not, he doesn't have a lot behind it because he's off balance, but I hear it doesn't feel all that great when it hits you.
No, it doesn't feel too great. I remember getting hit once during the fight, and I was like, okay, all right, well, he got a solid one in there. But yeah, it's weird with that style. It kind of made me a little wild too. Like I threw a few haymakers in there that I don't normally.
Yeah, I think that he's kind of the Beltran of Tuff-N-Uff, where Joey Beltran likes to just get people into the wild exchanges.
Yeah.
Because he has the gas thing and he'll keep going, and that seems to be. I don't know if Steve even knows who Joey Beltran is, but he most certainly kind of brings that style to the fights. And I've dubbed him Favre, because he does throw a football throw for his right hand. It's definitely not a punch. It's more of he's trying to wing the ball down the field, and your face happens to be in the way.
Yep.
Now, I was surprised you didn't do a little more ground game. Was there a reason? Was it just because of how unorthodox he was that you couldn't find a way in?
Yeah, so first round I got a good takedown. If I had more time to work, I think I probably could have ended it, with the mount position. And then second round, I don't know, I didn't go for any takedowns. Third round, I went for one and kind of abandoned it.
Right.
I was having fun with the stand up, so
right.
I don't know. I don't know why I didn't really go for the takedown more.
Well, I'm critiquing you, so you need to have an answer because I need to know. Clearly. And so you're not fighting in this next card. You're gonna hopefully fight for us in either March or April.
Yeah. So a little further down the line, just want to kind of take some time off, heal up some of the nagging injuries.
Right.
As your fighters say, they don't go into a fight 100%. Totally true. So just taking some time off, healing that up, getting through the busy season at work as well.
Right.
So.
Yeah, this is a tough time that's one of the reasons we don't have a show in December for Tuff-N-Uff is because it's hard to get people to be able to be locked down to fight when they're trying to get ready for the holidays. A lot of them have to travel. It's not an easy schedule to do. But so for your upcoming fights, will you be doing 205 again? Will you be doing 185?
More than likely 185, so we'll see kind of how my body reacts to. I'm going to try some new things, see how my body reacts, but more than likely it's going to be 185. I've grappled at 189 before, so I know I can make the weight.
Mm-hmm. You just have to not get injured, right?
Yeah, just got to not get hurt. And, I mean, I feel a lot faster, and I still feel strong, when my weight's a little bit lower. So ideally it would be 185, but if I have to take a fight at 205, then...
Right. Well, that's a weight class where I'd like to have more fighters, and it's hard to find bigger guys to fight at the amateur level, just because, especially 185 is maybe a little easier, except that's the weight. Most guys are coming in around 205, and that's a good weight for people who are football players and rugby players. So a lot of those guys are doing other sports.
Yeah.
The 205 is where you get kind of cruiserweight size, maybe 220 or so, and that becomes difficult to find for people to stay at the amateur level because there's so much need for them at the pro levels.
Yeah.
As soon as they get a couple of fights in, plus your lifespan probably isn't as long as far as fighting lifespan goes when you're taking huge knocks from people. You don't want to do 15 220-pound fights
For sure.
because that will mess you up in the long run.
Definitely.
But so do you have a plan for once you're doing these fights, how long you're going to stay at the amateur level? Now that you've experienced a fight and you kind of know what it feels like.
However long it takes for me and my coaches feel like I'm ready to go to the pro level, so I don't want to put a timeline on anything.
Right, okay.
I just want to make sure every time I'm in the cage I'm better than I was the time before.
Okay. And one of the things I wanted to touch on, because you were talking about dropping to 185, and you said you wrestled at 189 or grappled?
I did some grappling tournaments.
And Darnell, did you ever do big weight cuts for your wrestling? I know wrestling usually has a lot of big weight cuts.
No, I actually been a small guy all my life.
Okay. You didn't feel like cutting to 135 though in high school?
No, I was actually walking around at 130.
Fair enough. Because one of the unfortunate pieces of news we got out today was that Joe Camacho, who fought for Bellator and King of the Cage and Shuto, passed away today from a heart attack. And one of there's no real information out on it yet, but we also had Shane Del Rosario, who recently passed away from a heart attack. And it seems like weight cutting is probably one of the things that's going to be talked about pretty soon as far as the health of fighters. And so I was wondering both of your opinions on weight cuts as far as how you see it affecting the sport or whether or not you like it in the sport at all. So Darnell, what's your opinion on that?
My opinion of it is, it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
You get somebody that's, 200 and want to drop down to 150, that's going to be solid muscle if they do it correctly.
Right.
Without, taking any supplements.
Right.
So it could be a challenging.
Right.
But so far as on the other end, if you get somebody that, that don't do it correctly, it could be a downfall because their muscles is not going to know how to react.
Right. And one of the big problems I always see is just the stress when you're putting in the output you need for getting ready for fights, plus you're depleting your body. And it's really not easy, even for people who have professional help, to keep the right cocktail, I guess you'd say, of supplements and the proper foods and the right kind of diet while they're getting ready to drop. Then we have the huge dehydration cuts that people, especially at the pro levels, do. We don't see it too much in amateur, thankfully. But Andrea, what do you think as far as weight cutting? Like, how far would you be willing to go with that?
Not that far. Like, I don't want to, almost kill myself to make weight, especially.
You don't want to pull the Phil Davis?
Yeah, I don't want to pull the Phil Davis or Travis Luter, especially at the amateur ranks.
Right.
My health isn't worth it. I'd rather fight at a weight where I'm pretty comfortable, but still, sizable, still have, the size advantage, but nothing too drastic.
Right. See, I've always been able to cut weight really well, so it's weird for me to have to talk about how I wish people wouldn't do it, but I just get so worried about fighters. Maybe that's because I'm the fight nanny out here, and I'm constantly worrying about fighters and keeping up with them. But I see some of those weight cuts that people do at the pro level and even a couple at the amateur where I just worry about their kidneys and their heart and their liver, just all the things they need to process for the body to function properly. And as we're seeing today with another fighter that's passed away, of course it's pretty rare that somebody passes away, but now with more people getting into fighting, not all of them have proper nutritionists or trainers, I hope that they find some way to, I don't know if you could put a cap on it, but maybe do same day weigh-ins, or maybe just try to ask fighters to do gentlemen's agreements on these weight, because a lot of these guys who cut drastic weight are doing it because their opponent's doing it, when really they walk around at around the same weight anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So they could meet at a different weight class and be able to do it all right. You see guys like Chael Sonnen, who's 220 and cuts to 185, which, it's great that he can do that because he's been wrestling his whole life, but Anderson Silva does the same thing. So why don't you guys just both fight around 205?
Yeah.
Why don't, just so for the safety of the sport. And I do think, and maybe you can address this, Andre, but after you do a weight cut, it's harder to be 100% through an entire fight or even through a training camp. If you start cutting, if anyone who doesn't know what it feels like, just try not drinking water for a day.
Yeah.
And then go try to punch something because it's pretty difficult to do.
Yeah, it's not fun at all. At this last weigh-in, I was really dried out. My mouth,
yeah, I saw you scarfing down food after the weigh-in.
Yeah, and even that, just because my mouth was so dry from not drinking water, my mouth was raw, so the food I was eating was hurting, it was burning my tongue. I was like, I don't care, I gotta get some food and some liquid in me, but
right, and that wasn't even a full cut, right? Because you were supposed to be dropping to 185 and then moved up. Was that a 200 pounds? Was that the catch weight that you said?
205.
You went straight 205. Yeah. Okay. Would that extra 5 have just killed you for that day?
For that day, yeah, probably. But I don't know. I think I know boxing. Everybody always brags on for all the different weight classes, but
right.
I like that they have so many weight classes because you have 185 and then 205 in MMA. There's so many guys that could fit perfectly into a 195 division.
Well, I think if there were more fighters worldwide, maybe they do it. I think it's just so hard to keep enough fighters to keep people interested. It's hard enough to keep track of all the fighters now. Yeah. I remember back when there were, maybe 100 fighters in the UFC. And that was already a little difficult to keep them in line because there were maybe 4 weight classes.
Yeah.
And now, honestly, sometimes there's shows where I'm like, I don't even know who that is. I've never heard of him. And I am a nerd. Right. I follow all this stuff. But especially once the Russians start coming in and I can't differentiate any of their names, I just know they're hard to say. That's when I just kind of give up. I go, well, I hope that guy is a champion at some point so I can remember his name. Right. But yeah, the weight cutting thing is a difficult spot, I think, especially in amateur because there are wrestlers who know how to do it, and they know how to do it pretty well, at least when they're younger and their body can handle it. But you get a lot of people that come in who don't cut weight yet, so you get some real interesting disparities in size and weight. As we saw, Mikowski's probably going to drop to 170 at some point. But he's been walking around at 195, 200, and he thought that's just where you fight at.
Yeah.
He didn't even know about the weight cut. Then you got guys like David Guerrero, who came in on 3 days' notice and dropped 20 pounds in 3 days because he's a wrestler. He was the guy I had to go check on the day before because I wanted to make sure he was coherent because that's a crazy cut.
That's nuts.
But he worked hard to do it. But I still think it's crazy. Fighters, don't do that, please. Just come in, tell me your weight, give me a good walking weight. We'll put you 10 pounds below that. None of these 20-pound weight cuts. It scares me. I worry too much about you guys. I am a big baby about it, and I always want fighters to be as safe as possible in this already dangerous sport.
Right.
You don't need to add unnecessary danger by being depleted and not having to have water for 3 days. That's just crazy dangerous.
Chewing on ice chips.
Yeah, who did that? Yeah, that was Vitor Belfort, right? Where he always likes to chew on the ice chips in the towel.
Yeah.
Wraps it up in the towel and chews on it. But that man is crazy. He's not a normal person.
Yes.
So, Darnell, let's jump back. I wanted to talk a little bit about what you do for training to get ready for these fights. Since you're not really the average guy, you don't like to cut a lot of weight. You're at Gold's Gym, which isn't known for giving us a lot of fighters out here.
Okay.
But you're a guy that wants to fight. So what is it you do to get ready for these fights? And pretty much you can just walk us through what you went through last time before you unfortunately lost your opponent.
I just train, I try to train 8 hours out the day, before I have to go into work. Right. I have a coach that specializes in Muay Thai, and he just, takes me through circuit training.
Okay, so and how much time do you spend maybe per week to do your training?
I train every day.
Right? How many hours?
How many hours? At the most, doing cardio circuit training, about 4 hours a day.
You're a monster. I might have to set you up against somebody harder. So. No disrespect to your opponent, but if you're doing 4 hours a day of cardio, I'm a little worried about anybody. Because we have 2-minute rounds. So do you work on explosive training as well as the long distance stuff?
No, actually it's kind of short,
Okay.
We work short periods, and I punch the bag here and there. Then I'll do some squat thrusters, and then I'll pick up the dummy and run around with the dummy and throw them down, throw some punches and some elbow shots to the dummy.
Right.
And just, do a little rolling here and there, and that's it. Just mix it up a whole lot.
Well, now I need more people from Gold's Gym if that's the kind of way you guys work out. It's unfortunately we just haven't had many of you guys calling me up and asking me for fights, and I can only look for so many fighters. I got like 500 right now I'm dealing with. So.
Well, from that gym, I think it's just me, individually that does that or just hopped into the fight thing. I mean, it's a lot of guys that go there that box, that's been boxing for years and stuff. But so far as when I talk with them, so far as, just hopping out there, they like, nah, not for me.
Yeah, it is a different kind of game. Now, do you spend time working specifically on boxing with those guys?
I do.
Yeah. And how do you like I mean, boxing's a bit of a different beast.
Boxing is a challenge for me, but I'm looking to overcome it.
Right. Well, you do have a wrestling background. That's always the thing. If you got boxers, they cannot figure out wrestling, and wrestlers have a hard time figuring out boxing as quickly as other people might. Do you think that has to do with dealing with the different stance and mentality of the fight? Boxers have to stay in close and trade punches. Wrestlers usually like to stay a little outside so they can work their ground game. Was that a problem for you when you started doing sparring?
Yes.
Yeah.
Big problem.
And do you actually spend time specifically on trying to rectify those problems with stand-up? Or do you just try to incorporate your own game into what you already have?
Try to incorporate my own game into what I already have.
Right. And hopefully, I'm excited to see you fight. I know my bosses are excited to see you fight because they won't stop talking about you and making sure that I have as many backups for you as possible. I think part of it is the guilt of the last time. That was just a real unfortunate fall through.
Yeah, I mean, it was disappointing, but it also gave me more time to train.
That's true. Well, I know you were frustrated that day. I think we were all a little frustrated at that one. But this is, amateur level. You're going to get some of these guys that talk about that they want to fight and want to do it, and they don't show up, is what we talked about last time. Andre and I talk about quite often is a good, I'd say 70 to 80% of being successful in this is just showing up. You've already achieved so much by showing up and getting in there and doing what a lot of people say they could or want to do, and then they just don't do it. So at least you showed up, and I was glad you at least stayed for the show, because some people, I've seen fights fall through, and the other guy's just like, forget it. I'm going pro. I don't have time for this. So I'm glad you at least made it there.
No, I believe in, supporting other fighters. I mean, that's another way to get your name out there. Just go show some support, shake some hands.
Right.
Put a name to a face.
Well, and I'd say Tuff-N-Uff's a pretty good place to do that with how many people tend to show up. Plus, you get guys like Couture there and Vandelay. Go shake their hand. That's always fun. Although I babble like a moron. Every time I try to talk to Randy or Vandelay, I have a plan of what I'm going to say. And then when I start talking to him, I turn into a nerd. And I'm like, remember that one time you fought that guy? That was so awesome. And that's the worst time I ever had was talking to Rampage. And he shook my hand, and I got distracted by how big his hand was compared to mine. And my question to him was, do you like fighting? And then I went, oh, God. Like, in the moment, even, I was just like, oh, I ruined it. This is the worst day. So now you work at you train at Cobra Kai, Andre. So you don't have a lot of the, big name camp, people that show up to your gyms. But do you ever get a chance to roll or at least get to do a little training alongside of any bigger names?
Yeah, I mean, when some of the bigger names have fights in town, they'll stop by the gym. Like Johnny Hendricks, I haven't rolled with him in a long time since he actually lived out here.
Right.
Now he'll stop by every now and again.
And you got to beat him up, right?
Oh, of course.
You showed him how it was.
I taught him everything he knows, right?
Right. Like growing the beard, I imagine.
Yes, the beard he got from me. As you can see, with my full lush beard here. But yeah, I know Team Alpha Male was in there for like a week or two a few months back. So there's a lot of big names that do come by and they like to roll and hang out, but I haven't caught any of them in a while.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about Vegas is you get a lot of those big names, but I feel there's a lot of gyms out here, and there's only a few that really get those big names that come through, and it does make a difference to be able to be around those type of people so you see the kind of training that they put in. And as once again, I'm a nerd, so once they're in, I like take a seat and just sit and watch them and marvel in their abilities to train, because those guys have a whole different level. Even when they're quote unquote taking it easy, they're training as hard as like I could do on a good day with like 3 rock stars in me, and that's the pinnacle of what I can do, and that's their easy day. They're just chilling out.
Just light roll today.
If you've ever watched Mike Pyle at Syndicate train, that guy, his off days are days that look like he's walloping people. And, he's not being mean about it, but he's just able to hit people and take them down and choke them out or get them in arm bars just without trying, just hanging out and doing whatever and talking while he does it.
Holding a conversation.
Now, Darnell, do you get to train with anybody you have your Muay Thai guy, like you said. Do you have any other coaches that you work with with specific intent?
I have a boxing coach also that I go there and train with, and Wing Chun coach that I also train with.
Nate, so you switch between Muay Thai and boxing? You do both training styles? How's that to transition?
It's hard, but like I said, I'm just one of them guys that, is an overachiever.
Right.
So.
Well, that's good. I wish more people would do both Muay Thai and boxing, because I think there's a lot to both of them, but it's rare to hear somebody who actually trains in both. And since you already have a wrestling background, it's not like you have to worry too much about that. It's always good to keep up with the wrestling skills and whatnot, but...
Well, I mean, we're talking MMA, so, I mean, you got to be good in each aspect, so...
Right. Now, so, since you do wrestling, are you a guy that likes to find submissions, or are you a ground and pound kind of guy?
Any type of...
Right. Anything that shows up, essentially?
Yeah. Anything I can take, I'll take.
Yeah. No, it's a silly answer. You're supposed to have one specific move that you do every time. Be like a Gracie. Just have the 3 or 4. That's all you do. The 3 or 4 moves. It seems to work very well for them at the pro level. But so, you mentioned the Team Alpha Male guys, and they just fought recently on the latest UFC show, which was in Sacramento, which is kind of their stomping ground. And they didn't do as well as a lot of people thought they would, I guess. But I love watching the smaller guys, and all of them are, when they're not cutting weight, they're about average weight for guys, but they're usually shorter guys. Do you enjoy watching those fights?
I do. The technique and the speed and their cardio.
Right.
Like you watch the bigger guys, their technique will start to fade as they get in the later in the fight because of the cardio. But they are on point, just sharp, throughout the entire fight. Whether it be 3 rounds, 5 rounds. Hell, I'm sure some of those guys could go 7 rounds and still look.
I would imagine. Well, Uriah Faber probably could go a good 10. He could do a boxing match, or a boxing length, but with MMA rules, I'm pretty sure. But he's not a normal person.
No, not at all.
Darnell, do you like watching the smaller guys, or you like seeing the big guys bang?
I actually like the smaller guys.
Yeah. I've always been, I was a smaller fighter, so maybe I'm just being biased. But I always liked watching the smaller guys much more for the reasons you talked about, Andre, which is that their technique tends to persist throughout the fight. It's always fun to see big guys, like the Hunt versus Bigfoot fight that just happened. That's fun, but at the same time, it's a little hard to watch at times because they are pretty much walking zombies.
Yeah.
You tend not to see that at the lower levels. Even if they're getting beat up, they tend to keep their technique going. So I've always been a big proponent of that we should see a lot more smaller fights. I love when they brought in the flyweights, because those poor guys have been fighting bantamweights who were just lightweights dropping down, and then these little 125ers like Dodson and Johnson, I don't think they can make over 140.
No.
I mean, maybe if they lift all day, they could do it, but they're going to look like little pit bulls standing on their back legs. But I've always enjoyed those fights, and Alpha Male is one of the teams that kind of paved the way for those classes to be open. But again, they didn't really do as well. Darnell, I assume that you are a big fan of cardio output.
I'm not a big fan of it because, it's something that you need to do.
Yeah. And you said, though, that you do more short span explosive training. So you don't put in a lot of time for, you're not doing triathlons or anything, obviously.
No.
Do you think there's not really an advantage to having that kind of cardio?
I think there is, maybe on a pro level.
Right. You just don't have the time in the day with
doing everything. With 2 other jobs going on, no.
Right.
Don't got the time for it.
Because I always, especially for amateurs, I always felt like that would be a huge advantage. If you're someone that does like a Diaz brother kind of triathlon training, just to have that gas tank.
Yeah.
Even though the rounds are shorter, just to have it. So you can put that extra output and know that you can recover in between rounds well, because that's one of the big things longer term cardio gives you, is that ability to get through an intensive moment and then find your breath again. Be able to relax yourself and get back into mode. Before we go, because we're running out of time here, but I forgot to ask, and it would be terrible if I forgot to ask this. What was your favorite part of the fight night, Andre, when you were done? Like, when you look back on it, what was the thing?
Like, the favorite part of me, like, excluding me fighting? Like, or...
Oh, you can do that. I mean, obviously, you fighting is a big thing, because you got done, but, like, what's the moment when you look back on it that warms the cockles of your heart? What is the thing?
I don't know if I could say a specific moment. I mean, just the whole experience was cool. Like,
right.
Like I was just taking it all in, like being in the back and warming up, like getting my hands wrapped.
Right. Is that where you finally feel like a fighter?
Yeah.
When you're doing that warm up.
Yeah, when you're doing the warm up, and you got your coaches talking to you about game plan, and then you're standing by the entrance, like ready to go, and you got the production manager on the walkie-talkie, like,
right.
do this. Like,
that's the only other person that's more stressed than me.
I bet that's stressful. So yeah, just the entire event is just really cool to know that you were a part of that.
Right. And Darnell, I know that you will say, I'm looking forward to almost everything here, but if you can pick what's that one thing that you're looking forward to specifically? Is it just being able to get in there and get it done? Is it being able to be around all the other fighters, being in front of the fans?
Honestly, I'm looking forward to the walkout.
Yeah? See, a lot of people are afraid of that one. I like everything about you, Darnell. You got the right attitude. Makes my job much easier. But is it anything specific about the walkout that makes it important to you, or is it just that moment in itself?
Just that moment in itself. You know, what goes through your head as a fighter. You know, you finna step into a cage. They finna lock the door.
Right.
You know, the whole thing.
Yeah, well, that's... Honestly, I wish I would have had that experience in my amateur shows, but I was on carpet fighting with a rope around the carpet, because that was 2003 in Northern California. They didn't have any shows going on.
Nice.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. Who likes to get their ass kicked by a karate guy? Bootsy does.
Boom.
It was a lot of fun.
Funny thing about the walkout, like I remember thinking like, all right, just make sure you don't trip. And then I was walking up the stairs to get in the cage, and I tripped. And it's like,
you can't think about not tripping. You're gonna trip every time. You gotta act like you own it, that you know you're not gonna trip, and that's how you get up there. See, you're just too tall though. That's your problem.
Probably.
You gotta be a shorter person close to the stairs. You can see him.
Right,
easier.
like misjudge the step.
No. Now, I gotta ask. See, now we're going a little long, but I gotta ask about that trip. Then, was it because you were in another spot in your head, or was it just a silly moment of tripping?
Yeah, it was just a silly moment. That's all.
I
remember going up the stairs. I was like, yeah, all right, we gotta go up these stairs and get in the cage. Just make sure not to trip. Boom. I think it was like the last step I tripped on. I was like, oh.
Well, it fits your personality a little, I think. You know, you're a tough guy that gets in there, but you got a sense of humor.
Yeah.
So you got to have those moments. Now, I hope we have footage of it so it can be on your highlight reel. That's what I want to see, is that we get an Andre highlight reel where then you just we'll put it in every 30 seconds. It's just you tripping, and then you fighting, and then you tripping. I think it'd be good.
Right.
Now, either you have any sponsors you want to give a shout out to before we go?
No.
Anything? No, don't have anybody? Good.
No, but I will say Fight Grind. Or, see, I messed it up. Man.
No, you said Fight Grind. That's what we are.
I say train by day, Fight Grind radio by night all day.